Howdy do, everyone. Can I say howdy do? I can say howdy do, can't I? Watch this. Hey, how's everybody doing? I forgot my Bible. I gotta go all the way back there. It's exercise. All right. Just talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back. Just got to get the Word of God. Oh my God, it's crying out loud. It's Sunday, you know. Everything's going bad here. I even highlighted things too. It's not my Bible, so it's really hard to. Hi, how are you? I like people shorter than me. Keep them coming. Hey, I got a couple of announcements just to add to the announcements. First off, it's great to see everybody here. What do you think of our new the new pulpit thing here, right here? I thank the memorial team for this. I had trouble finding it, hurt my head, but it's right here. Also, I wanted to just to announce our church is growing, right? It seems like, every time that we keep the two rows here just still vacant, and everyone just keeps closing in the back there. But so I thought, this church probably needs another pastor. So Alice and I are getting married. So so buy one, get one free is what I'm saying. Isn't that something? So, anyway, I wanted to pass that on to you guys, and it's probably not going to be until October. She wanted several months to change her mind, so, yeah, I don't know about that. She kept saying, show me the ring again. Is that? I'm not sure. How big is it? Yeah, okay, maybe. So, that's what we're doing. So, anyway, today we are on Confirmation Part 18. We are almost done with this. It's going to take us all the way to Easter and maybe just a little bit about Easter. So one of the things that I loved yesterday, or how many people were here last Sunday when we read just Jesus' things? How many people just kind of walked out of that going, holy cow, that was rough? That's some hard stuff to take it was all of Jesus saying, don't do this, and if you do this, you're a hypocrite, and you don't do that, and and you walk out feeling quite overwhelmed by the whole thing, thinking there's not one thing that he mentioned that I didn't really screw up on already, and just on the ride here, And so I wanted us to walk away with that just for a reason, because that is what it is to be Christ-like. But Jesus gave us some stuff called parables that explained how hard it is to do that and where he is when we fail to do that. One of my favorite parables actually is the parable of the lost son, or the prodigal son, whichever you want to call it. Now this is going to be a little bit serious too. I'm going to tell the story here. First off, there was a father. Don't laugh, this is serious. He was a loving father, and he had two sons. His youngest son was a little bit of a party animal, and I had to use the Diet Coke. I don't drink. I don't have any booze in the house, so there was nothing I could take. I should have asked Chuck. He probably has several. But that was the youngest son. The oldest son was just a grumpy guy, and just looked like that all the time. Man, I have a rubber face, don't I? And I'm sorry about the shaving, too. It was a trimming accident. The beard's coming back. So, here's the story. The youngest son, the party animal, he comes up to the father, and he says, Dad, I want my half of your inheritance. I want to just go take it, and I want to just do what I want with it. Give me my half now, and I'll be on my way. Now, that seems like something that, is just kind of rude, but back then, it was much more than that. Because if you were to ask for that, what you're asking for is the inheritance. What you were saying in that culture is, Dad, I wish you were dead. You're saying, die now, give me my stuff. My stuff is much more important to your life, because once I get that stuff, it's basically that you have died. And so this is a very, very, most parents would disown their kids at this time. They would not only disown them, they would probably even try to punish them, have them physically harmed, because this is a great insult. You're saying your entire worth is much more important to me than your life, and if I could, I'd kill you right now just to take my inheritance, but I'm going to give you the chance just to give me the stuff now. And so the father would be very much in his right to say, get out of here. You're not my son. I hate you, and I'm going to have some thugs knock some sense into you. He would be very much into his right. But the father was different. The father actually said, okay, I will give you everything that is coming to you that would come to you if I die. So this is a father that had wealth, servants, land, everything, and he just gave half of it to his younger son. And the son just runs off with it, cashes in all the land, and goes and just spends the money. And he spends it so wildly that eventually he actually runs out of the money, and then a drought comes in. So he is not only out of money, out of a home, but he's also out of work. He's also out of water. He's struggling. And so one of the things that he does is he tries to get hired on for a pig farmer. And he's in charge of feeding the swill and stuff to the pigs. Kind of the leftover garbage. That's what the pigs would eat. And he's so hungry and he's so poor and he's so distraught that the pig goo is starting to actually look pretty good to him. Now let's take a moment on. See, that sounds icky, in any ways. But remember that culture. This is a Jewish person. Cows were detestable to them. They were not okay. Not cows. Did I say cows? I'm getting married. Pigs were detestable to them. They were not kosher. So even the things to feed pigs were not okay. And who would be raising pigs? Gentiles or pagans. So not only is he sacrificing his own beliefs, he's sacrificing his faith. He is down in the gutter having to work for the people that he's supposed to be kind of clearing himself away from. And he's craving the food that's meant to actually feed the things that aren't even kosher to him, that he can't even eat. And so that's something that in Jesus' time, as he's telling this story, people would gasp at that because he mentioned hogs, that he was down with the hogs. That's lower than low. That's more than in the gutter. That's bad news. That's walking away from everything. And so the son says, what can I do? What can I do? I'm so hungry. What if I went back to my dad with my hands, clasped? And I went to him and I said, not to make me a member of the family anymore, because I've ruined that. Maybe I could ask to be a hired hand, because a hired hand is even more low than a servant. Servants were thought of almost as children in the time of Jesus. They were not slaves. They were very cared for. It was almost like a part of that family. And he's going back saying, I can't even be a part of that family. I can't even be a servant. Maybe he'll just give me a hired hand and I can just get something to eat, a place to stay. So he goes, tail between his legs, and he goes up to the dad. He's walking home, and before he even gets to the house, the dad sees him coming. And he jumps out of the house with a gun. No, I'm just kidding. He actually jumps out of the house. That's the way we would think the story ends, but he jumps out of the house, and he runs to his son. And again, back up into the culture. Men did not run. This is another thing that Jesus would say that would get a gasp, because men were not, it just wasn't, women could run, children could run, men, they did not run. It meant hiking up your skirt, and you had to run, for the sun. It was almost as if someone said, boy, did you see the priest came, he gave the sermon without a shirt. It would make you gasp and go, that's not okay. That's exactly the gasp that Jesus was hoping for. Because already the father is humiliating himself. Hikes up his little gown thing, whatever they wore, and he runs to the son. And the Bible actually says his head fell on the neck of his son, and he kissed him. He was so elated to see him. So elated. So the son, who is feeling down and out, runs to the father, who's just happy to see him. That's my happy face. I'm so sorry. Now, the son says, I just need food. Can I work for you? And the father says, no. And he calls his servants and he says, kill the fatted calf. Now, this was an older calf, but it was the prize calf. This was huge. This would have been half the fortune already. And he's saying, kill the fatted calf. We are going to have a banquet, and we are going to welcome my son back. Bring him some sandals, and most importantly, bring him a ring. You see, the ring, back in those days, if you were signing a contract or if you were doing anything, you did not sign your signature. It was a family ring. You would take it and you would put like wax on an envelope, and you would smack your ring on it and seal it. So your seal was said and done. That was a contract signed. It was done. Your family seal. Family seal. By doing this, he's welcoming his son back to the family. He's not even asked his son what he did. He's not even asking his son anything. He's hiking up his skirt, running to him and saying, you are a part of my family. And he says, we're going to have a banquet to celebrate this. And so he gets now, banquets in those days, you're talking probably over 100 people. You're talking very expensive. It wasn't just a dinner and having people over. It was a huge, huge event. The fatted calf, that was a huge, huge event. Now, the oldest son, he's out there working in the fields, and he comes in and he says, what's all the excitement about? Why is everybody, dancing and joyful and everything like this? And one of the servants says, your brother's come home, and we're celebrating. Well, he gets a little upset about this. Because he comes up to the dad, and he actually steps outside. He said, I'm not going to take a part of this because of what he did. I'm not going to take any part of this. So the father sees that his older son is outside, and he goes to him. He comes to him. It's very important to remember. He doesn't say, hey, get in here and behave yourself. He actually goes to him. And he says, what's the problem? He said, I've worked for you my entire life. I've never done anything wrong. I've never done anything wrong. And you're having a banquet for this guy? And he even calls it for your son? He won't even acknowledge him as his own brother now. As far as he's concerned, he's kicked out of the family. And he says, I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this. Why are you letting this guy in here? And he says, I've always had you. But my son was lost, and now he's found. He was dead, and now he lives. So when we look at this story, the son, most people focus on that younger son and just say, it's God just welcoming people back. We get it. But I want to focus just a second on the older son. The older son had every right to react that way, especially in those times. He saw his father get terribly insulted. He saw his father lose half of his stuff, and what's more, the stuff that the father is spending right now, that's the older brother's stuff now. That's what he's supposed to inherit. And so he comes in and sees his father spending all this stuff on this big banquet, and so the son is not only angry because the younger son has basically abused the father, he's also angry because the younger son and the father are spending his stuff. He's sacrificing his own stuff for this. And he doesn't think that's right. And in those days, he would have been absolutely in his right to do that. The people listening to Jesus at the time would be saying, that makes sense. They would side with the older brother because it was ridiculous what he did. He wished his father dead. He left. He took half of the family fortune. He spent it all. And now he's just coming back without an explanation, without saying what he did. And he's welcomed back in a celebration. Why do we do this? But the older son is the one that doesn't get it. Both of these sons have done something to block themselves from the love of God, from seeing it. And that's Jesus' point. This is the wonderful thing about parables and the wonderful things about the stories, he says, is that they're not very simple. They're not just, that's the story, that's the lesson. They're layered. And he's speaking to everybody in the crowd. He's also speaking to the Pharisees, who are the older brothers. They're looking at behavior, and they're also looking at, I'm not going to sacrifice my wealth for that loser. And the Father is saying everybody is invited to the banquet. And the actions of the Father are very Christ-like. And so that would have been very odd for people to hear. The Father ran to the youngest son, and he went outside to the oldest son. He came to them to see what was wrong and to invite them both to the banquet. He came to them. The only thing that was blocking them was their own issues. You know, we looked at this stuff last week about what Jesus was saying about you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. But one thing that Jesus likes to point out is there's usually something that's blocking us from achieving that. And sometimes it can be one thing that we don't see right in front of our eyes. It can be like a clear thing like this, and we can't even see why we're not reaching God or why God is unable to reach us. And part of that, for the youngest son, was greed. Was just wanting to do his own thing. Was just wanting to party it up and just have his own thing. We kind of get that. The oldest son, what his thing was blocking him was his own pride and his own greed. He was having things himself. He was looking at behaviors. What Jesus is saying is that the stuff that he said on the Sermon on the Mount that you have to follow, he knows you cannot follow that all the time. He's saying you need the God principle in this. You need the forgiveness in this. You need the Father to come out and run to you. It was his own pride and their own selfishness that blocked them from that. And sometimes that can be what we do. Sometimes that can be just our own little thing that blocks us from our own happiness. Sometimes it can almost be our own thinking that we can't do what God wants us to do, so we kind of keep our distance. Kind of like when you're in trouble with your parents, you kind of avoid them when they get home. Right? Looking right at you. Birthday girl. Don't give me that look. That's such a German look. It can be something as simple as pride. It can be something as simple as guilt. It can be something as simple as that. And what God says is, you know what? Everybody's invited to this. And I will hack up my skirt and I will run to you. This is actually what the picture that we want to remember looks like. This is the image of a father that loves his sons. And he doesn't care what they did. As long as they come, he is going to come and meet you halfway. He is going to celebrate with you. Everybody is invited to the banquet. What Christ was saying is that heaven's the banquet. And he is the banquet. And everybody's invited to that. So don't let your things put you down and don't worry so much. Oftentimes we get into a worry about whether or not we're worthy, and so that keeps us going into pointing out, well, somebody's got to be worse than me, like the older brother. You know, he might have had some of his own guilt, so he's really focusing on that younger brother, saying, that's the bad guy that you want to go hunt down. And by doing that, he was unable to see what was blocking him from his father's love. Everybody's invited. Everybody's invited. You know, and the funny thing, too, is the older brother didn't want to sacrifice. The son did not want to sacrifice for the father's love. Thank God our God's Son did. Because that's the other part of the lesson, is that Christ is the older brother. And we have run away, and we have fallen, and we have done some stupid things, and we have come back with our tail between our legs. And God says, welcome back, I'm going to spend everything I have. And the older son in this case is saying, yes, sacrifice everything that I have and welcome them back with open arms. We're just grateful that God is not like an older brother in this story, but God is God, because he's inviting us to the banquet. Now, you know, oftentimes with communion, we get to where suddenly we have to take a real serious note, you know? I mean, you can be joking around, and then it's like, and now let us celebrate communion. You're all sinners. You've all, you know, and then we just go into this big sing a hymn, blah, blah, blah. This is a banquet. This is something that in the old days, when the church first started, people would meet in their homes, and they would sit at this. And it wasn't very formal at all. These were peasants sitting at their homes. And they might sing together, and they might talk about some of the stories of Christ, and then they just break the bread, and they share it for everybody. Doesn't matter the denomination, doesn't matter whether you're sinning. Oh my God, if we didn't allow this to have sinners come to this, there'd be a full loaf and it'd be molding. This is for everybody. This is a joyous occasion. This is God saying, I'm God. And guess what? This is the banquet. The banquet is my body. The banquet is me giving everything that I have for you. The banquet is me coming with my own blood, running to greet you and welcome you and put my arms around you and welcome you into the kingdom, because the banquet is for everybody. Remember, that banquet had servants in it. It had hired hands in it. It had family in it. It had anybody that wanted to come. There's a big difference why Jesus didn't tell the story as, and then they had just a small dinner, just the family. He had a banquet, which in those days everybody was invited. And now I would ask everybody here to come take part of this banquet and to think about the joy and to think about how God is just waiting there for us, to run to us, non-conditionally, not to meet us halfway, but to run to us with even just our first step, and to put his arms around us and to let his head fall on our shoulders and welcome us back.